11:24 a.m. at Rustygate Storage. The air is thick with oil and dust. A 7'1" man in an old gray hoodie walks down hallway 4. This is Shaquille O'Neal. He has 4 NBA rings and a PhD. He is here to check the old fire system in the building he just bought. Suddenly, the manager, Mr. Thompson, starts screaming. A young mom named Clara looks very tired. She hides her 2 kids behind her. Clara has only $9.14 left in her bank account. They have lived in Unit 102 for 3 weeks. Thompson tells them to leave right now. He says they are breaking the rules. Shaq stands there and watches quietly. He sees the mean manager and the mother's sad face. Will the law stop him? Or will this giant man find a way to fix everything? Shaq had walked into Rustygate Storage that morning like a regular customer. Nobody knew who he really was. He wore an old gray hoodie with a small hole near the left sleeve. His shoes were plain black sneakers, size 23. He carried a folded paper with old blueprints inside it. He had to duck his head under every low doorway. The hallway lights buzzed and flickered above him. Some bulbs were dead. Others hummed like tired bees. He walked slowly, careful not to knock anything over. His shoulders almost touched both walls at once. He turned sideways to pass through the narrow lane between storage units. Dust floated in the thin light from a broken window. The smell of old oil and rust filled his nose. He noticed rusty locks on many doors. Some doors had deep dents, like someone had kicked them. Paint peeled off the walls in long gray strips. This place had not been cared for in years. A row of security cameras hung useless near the ceiling, their wires cut long ago. Nobody had bothered to fix them. Shaq made a mental note of every broken thing he passed. He passed a small office window, with dusty blinds pulled halfway down. Inside, he could see stacks of unopened mail piled on a desk. A calendar on the wall still showed a month from last year. Down near the end of the hall, a vending machine sat dark and unplugged. Someone had taped a handwritten sign to the front. It read simply, "Out of order," in faded black marker. Shaq stopped and looked at a stain on the concrete floor. It looked like old motor oil, dried and cracked. He thought about how many families might live behind these doors. Somebody was not doing their job here. He had bought the company that owned this storage yard only 2 days ago. Almost nobody knew about the deal yet. His lawyer, a calm man named Mr. Whitmore, had signed the papers quietly on his behalf. Shaq wanted to see the real building with his own eyes before anyone dressed things up for him. He had learned that lesson years ago, buying his very first small business. Managers often cleaned everything up before the owner arrived for a visit. This time, Shaq had told nobody about his early morning walkthrough. He wanted to see the real hallways, the real smells, the real people. Numbers on a spreadsheet never told the whole story. Only walking the actual floor could show him the truth. He remembered growing up in Newark, New Jersey. Summers there could feel like an oven. Their small apartment often had no air conditioning at all. He remembered sweat soaking through his shirt just from sitting still. His mother, Lucille, would open every window she could find. She would place a small fan in the doorway to push warm air through the rooms. Young Shaq used to sit on the floor because it felt cooler there. He never forgot that heat or that small fan working so hard. Lucille worked 2 jobs back then, sometimes coming home after midnight. She never complained, not once, even when her feet ached badly. She always made sure Shaq had dinner waiting, even if it was simple. One winter, their landlord raised the rent, without any warning at all. Lucille had to choose between paying it and buying winter coats. She chose the coats, and they wore extra layers indoors instead. Shaq remembered standing beside her at the kitchen table, counting coins together. She never let him see her worry, not fully. But he noticed the tired lines around her eyes, growing deeper each year. That memory had shaped him more than any trophy or contract ever could. It taught him that dignity mattered more than comfort. It taught him to notice tired mothers, wherever he found them. He looked at the blueprint in his hands again. The fire sprinkler system was almost 30 years old. Some pipes on the map were marked in red ink. Somebody before him had planned repairs, but never finished them. Then a sharp sound echoed down the hallway. It was a man's voice, loud and full of anger. It came from hallway 4, near Unit 102. Something heavy hit the floor with a bang. Shaq walked toward the noise. He moved quietly, despite his size. As he came closer, he saw a woman kneeling on the concrete floor. She was gathering scattered photographs with shaking hands. Her name was Clara Whitfield, though nobody there said her name that morning. She had messy brown hair pulled into a low ponytail. Her jacket was thin, too thin for the cold morning air. Her eyes looked red, like she had not slept in days. Two children huddled behind her legs in the doorway of Unit 102. A little boy, about 6 years old, held his sister's hand tightly. His name was Toby. His 4-year-old sister, Mia, pressed her face into his shoulder. Behind them sat a small camping stove and a folded blanket on the concrete floor. A cracked photo frame lay near Clara's knee. Someone had clearly been living here, hidden from the world outside. Standing over Clara was a man in a stiff blue uniform. His name tag read Thompson, manager. His face was red, and his voice kept rising louder. He held Clara's cracked phone up high, out of her reach. $9.14, Thompson said, laughing without any kindness. You call that rent money? He waved the phone like a trophy, taunting her. Clara did not answer. She kept her eyes down, focused on collecting the photos. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady when she finally spoke. Please, just 5 more minutes. I need to get my kids' shoes. Thompson shook his head hard. You have 15 minutes, he snapped, or I call the police myself. He glanced at his watch like he enjoyed the countdown. Little Mia whimpered and buried her face deeper into her brother's shoulder. Shaq stood still in the shadow of the hallway. Every instinct told him to step forward immediately, but something older and wiser held him back. His father's voice echoed quietly in his memory. His father, Sergeant Philip Harrison, once told him something important. Power without patience is just noise, he had said. Shaq had carried those words with him for 30 years. He watched Toby's eyes more closely. There was fear in them, but also fierce protection for his little sister. It reminded Shaq of himself at 10 years old. He remembered watching his own mother get yelled at by a landlord over unpaid rent. That memory still burned inside him after all these years. He clenched his fists slowly, then let them relax again. Reacting with anger now would only make things worse for this family. He needed a plan, not just anger. His phone buzzed quietly in his pocket. It was his assistant, reminding him about a $50 million meeting starting soon. Shaq glanced at the screen, then put the phone away without answering. Some meetings could wait. This could not. He thought about walking away, the way a busy billionaire might. Nobody would blame him. Nobody even knew he was standing there. But Shaq had never wanted to be that kind of man. He remembered his father's old army boots by their front door in Newark. Sergeant Harrison used to say greatness meant showing up when nobody was watching. Shaq took one slow, deep breath. Then he stepped fully into the light of the hallway. His shadow stretched across the floor, dark and enormous. Thompson turned, startled by the sudden size of the man behind him. For a moment, the manager's confidence flickered, just slightly. He did not recognize this quiet giant at all. Can I help you? Thompson asked, straightening his shoulders and puffing out his chest. He still thought he was in complete control of this hallway. Shaq's calm eyes studied him, without any anger showing. I have a question about your lease policy, Shaq said evenly. His deep voice filled the narrow hallway like distant thunder. Does it allow you to search a tenant's personal belongings without a court order? Thompson blinked, clearly caught off guard by the strange question. Who exactly are you? He asked, suspicion creeping into his tone. Shaq did not answer directly. He simply turned his gaze toward Clara, checking that she was safe. Thompson's confusion quickly turned back into anger and control. He waved toward a heavy-set security guard walking up the hallway. Silas, get this guy out of here, Thompson ordered sharply, pointing at Shaq. Silas approached slowly, sizing up the stranger with narrowed eyes. When he got close enough to see Shaq's full height, he hesitated. Something about this calm giant made him uneasy, though he could not explain why. Silas had worked at Rusty Gate for almost 4 years now. He had seen Thompson yell at tenants many times before. Each time, Silas told himself it was not his business to interfere. He glanced at Clara, then at the 2 frightened children behind her. Something about this particular morning felt different, heavier somehow. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, unsure what to do. Sir, I need you to step back, Silas said, though his voice lacked real conviction. Shaq looked at him calmly, not with anger, but with quiet understanding. Silas lowered his hand slightly, no longer reaching for his radio. Clara, still kneeling, suddenly found a small spark of courage. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper. He raised my cleaning fee again, she said quietly, without any notice. She handed the paper toward Shaq, her hand shaking slightly. It was a receipt showing an extra $150 charged weekly. Thompson's eyes widened as he realized what she was doing. That paper means nothing, Thompson snapped, trying to grab it back. Shaq simply stepped between them, calm and immovable as a wall. He held the paper gently, reading every line with careful attention. I would like to see the full maintenance records for this building, Shaq said. His tone stayed polite, but firm underneath the softness. Thompson opened his mouth, then closed it again, unsure how to respond. Every second Shaq spent asking questions bought more time. Time for Clara to breathe, and time for the children to feel a little safer. Thompson's confidence started slipping, though his pride refused to show it. Sir, I don't answer to random visitors, Thompson said, forcing his voice to sound tough. Shaq simply looked at him, unbothered by the tone. Silence, he had learned long ago, often spoke louder than shouting ever could. Shaq turned and gestured for Clara to lead him deeper into the storage unit. She hesitated, glancing at Thompson, then slowly stood up. Toby held Mia's hand tighter as they all moved together into Unit 102. Inside the unit, the air felt thick and damp. A faint smell of powdered milk hung near an old cooler. Mold crept along one corner of the ceiling, dark and spreading slowly. A thin air mattress lay on the floor, patched with silver tape. Shaq had to bend nearly in half just to step through the doorway. His head barely cleared the low ceiling once inside. He looked around slowly, taking in every small, painful detail of the space. Clara explained, almost in a whisper, that she worked 3 different jobs. She delivered packages during the day and cleaned offices in the evening. At night, she loaded boxes at a nearby warehouse until 2 a.m. Even with all 3 jobs, she still could not afford the fees Thompson kept raising. Every week, some new charge appeared on her bill. She had stopped asking why a long time ago. Shaq noticed a small stack of papers tucked behind an old suitcase. He asked gently if he could look through them. Clara nodded, too tired to argue anymore. The papers were folders belonging to other families in the building. 12 different names were listed, each with similar unpaid fees and warnings. Shaq realized quickly that this was not one bad decision. This was a pattern, repeated over and over. He flipped through the folders slowly, reading each family's story. One folder belonged to an elderly man named Walter, living alone in Unit 118. Another belonged to a young couple with a newborn baby in Unit 204. Every folder showed the same pattern of sudden fees and threats. Thompson had built a quiet system of fear across the entire building. Nobody had dared to report him, afraid of losing their only shelter. Shaq closed the folder gently, his jaw tightening just slightly. He thought about how easily people in trouble get overlooked. Nobody had come looking for these families until today. He looked back at Clara, who was watching him nervously. How long has he been doing this? Shaq asked quietly. Since before I got here, Clara answered. Almost 2 years, from what other tenants told me. Outside the unit, Thompson's patience finally snapped completely. He pulled out his phone and called the local police department. He also called someone he believed was the building's true owner, far away in New York. He did not know, yet that the real owner stood only a few feet away. Within minutes, red and blue lights flashed outside the storage building. 2 police officers walked briskly down hallway 4 toward Unit 102. Thompson met them, with a triumphant smile stretched across his face. This man broke in, he told the officers, pointing dramatically at Shaq. And this woman is illegally living here, with her kids. Rain had begun falling outside, tapping loudly against the metal roof. The officers looked at Shaq, then at Clara and her frightened children. One officer stepped forward, reaching for a small notebook. Sir, we need you to step outside, the officer said firmly. Shaq nodded calmly, keeping his hands visible and relaxed at his sides. He caught Clara's eyes for just a moment, silently asking her to stay calm too. Thompson ordered Clara and her children to gather their things immediately. "You're done here," he said coldly, gesturing toward the rain outside. Mia began crying softly, clutching her stuffed rabbit against her chest. Toby stepped in front of his sister, trying to look brave. His small hands shook, but his chin stayed lifted high. Clara pulled both children close, whispering that everything would be okay. Thompson smiled, clearly enjoying the power he still believed he held. He turned back toward the officers, pointing again at Shaq. "Arrest him first," he said, "then deal with the squatters." One officer frowned slightly at the harsh word Thompson used. He glanced at the tired mother and her frightened children. Something about this situation did not sit right with him. Shaq felt anger rising hot inside his chest, but he held it firmly in place. He remembered his father's words about power and patience once again. Losing control now would only hurt Clara's chances later. Instead, he stayed quiet, letting the officers do their required checks. He answered every question calmly, giving his full legal name without hesitation. The officers exchanged confused glances when they heard the name clearly. One officer stepped away, dialing a number on his radio. Word had begun spreading fast through dispatch about the strange call. Meanwhile, Thompson stood proudly near the entrance, arms crossed with satisfaction. Then a black car pulled up outside, its headlights cutting through the rain. A tall man in a sharp gray suit stepped out quickly. He carried a thick red folder tucked under one arm. This was Mr. Whitmore, Shaq's personal lawyer, arriving just in time. He had received an alert the moment police were dispatched to the address. He never let a call like that go unanswered, not for this client. He walked briskly past Thompson, without even glancing at him. Rain dripped from his coat, but his steps stayed calm and steady. "Officers," he said clearly, "you may want to check exactly who you're detaining." He opened the folder and showed the documents to both officers. Their eyes moved quickly across the pages, widening with each new detail. Whitmore continued speaking in a calm, confident voice. "This gentleman legally purchased this entire storage company at 10:47 this morning," Whitmore said. "That includes every building, every account, and every employee working here." The officers slowly turned to look at Thompson. Thompson's face went pale, almost gray, as understanding hit him hard. His hands began shaking slightly as he realized his terrible mistake. He had just tried to have his new boss arrested. "You mean Thompson stammered, unable to finish his own sentence. Whitmore nodded once, his expression completely serious. "Yes," he said simply. "You've been reporting to Mr. O'Neill without even knowing it." The officers stepped back respectfully, closing their notebooks, without another word. Silas, the security guard, quietly lowered his radio and stared at the ground. Even the rain seemed to soften for a moment outside. Shaq did not gloat or raise his voice at all. He simply turned back toward Clara, his expression softening completely. "Are you and your kids okay?" he asked gently, ignoring Thompson entirely. Clara nodded, though tears now streamed silently down her cheeks. Toby watched everything, with wide, careful eyes, still holding his sister's hand. Mia peeked out from behind her brother, curious about the giant man. Whitmore quietly explained to the officers that Thompson faced serious accusations. Fraudulent billing, illegal searches, and unsafe living conditions topped a growing list. The officers agreed to review everything, with full department support. Shaq turned toward Thompson, his voice calm, but absolutely final. "You're finished here," he said simply. "Effective immediately for exploitation and serious safety violations." Thompson opened his mouth, but no words came out. He tried once more to argue, gesturing wildly toward the storage units. "I was just following company policy," he insisted weakly, sweat beading on his forehead. Shaq shook his head slowly, unmoved by the excuse. Company policy never included stealing from tired, struggling families, Shaq replied firmly. His words landed heavier than any shout could have. Thompson's shoulders slumped completely, all his earlier bravado gone. The officers stepped forward and quietly began the arrest process for fraud charges. Thompson did not resist. He simply stared at the ground, silent and small now. The powerful manager, from minutes earlier, had completely disappeared. Shaq turned his attention fully back to Clara and her children. "Let's get you all somewhere warm and dry," he said softly. He gestured toward his car parked just outside the entrance. Clara hesitated, glancing nervously at the rain and the flashing lights. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she admitted quietly. Shaq shook his head gently, correcting her without any pity in his tone. "You do now," he said simply, holding the car door open for her. Toby climbed in first, helping his little sister up the step. Clara followed slowly, still stunned by everything happening around her. They drove a short distance to a small, cozy diner nearby. It had red vinyl booths and the smell of warm pancakes in the air. Shaq folded himself carefully into a small plastic chair. The chair creaked loudly under his weight, and Toby giggled at the sound. Mia smiled shyly for the first time since Shaq had arrived. Clara watched quietly, still trying to understand what was happening. Shaq ordered pancakes, eggs, and hot chocolate for the entire table. He listened patiently as Clara slowly began sharing more of her story. Her husband had left 2 years ago, leaving unpaid bills behind him. She had tried shelters first, but most were completely full every night. Storage units, though against every rule, felt safer than sleeping outside in a car. She had never wanted anyone to know her secret. Shaq listened without judgment, nodding slowly as she spoke. He remembered his own mother working double shifts just to keep their small apartment. Pride, he knew, often kept people silent about their hardest struggles. "You did what you had to do to protect your kids," Shaq said quietly. Clara's eyes filled with tears again, but these felt different now. Relief, not fear, colored her expression completely. Toby asked Shaq if he really used to play basketball. Shaq laughed, a warm sound that filled the small diner. "A long time ago," he said, "before my knees started complaining." Toby giggled, and even Clara managed a small smile. Mia asked if his shoes hurt his feet, since they looked so big. "Sometimes," Shaq admitted, "but I got used to them." He wiggled his foot under the table, making Mia laugh out loud. Clara watched her children laughing for the first time in weeks. Something inside her chest loosened, just a little. She had almost forgotten what their laughter sounded like. She told Shaq more about her husband, a man named Danny. He had left suddenly one morning, taking most of their savings with him. She had not heard from him since, not even a phone call. She had applied to 3 different shelters that same week. 2 were completely full, and 1 required paperwork she did not have. The storage unit had felt like her only choice at the time. "I never wanted anyone to see us like that," Clara admitted quietly. "I was ashamed, even though I knew it wasn't my fault." Shaq nodded slowly, understanding more than she realized. "Shame likes to hide in silence," he said gently. "But you kept your kids safe. That took more strength than most people will ever understand." Clara wiped her eyes, nodding without trusting her voice just yet. After breakfast, Shaq explained his plan carefully, without making it feel like charity. Rustygate Storage would close down completely within the next 30 days. In its place, something new would rise from the same ground. He called it the Big Foundation Center, a place built for people, not profit. It would offer free temporary housing for families facing sudden hardship. Real beds, real kitchens, and real dignity would replace cold storage units. Clara listened, stunned, as Shaq continued explaining the details slowly. He wanted someone who truly understood the struggle to help run it. Someone who had lived through exactly what these families were facing. "I'd like you to manage the day-to-day operations," Shaq said directly. Clara blinked, certain she had misheard him completely. "Me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You understand these families better than any manager ever could," Shaq explained patiently. "The salary would be $5,200 every month. A real apartment, safe and warm, would come with the position." Clara covered her mouth with both hands, tears spilling freely now. Toby looked between his mother and Shaq, sensing something important had just happened. Mia simply reached for another pancake, unaware of the magnitude around her. Over the following weeks, Rustygate Storage transformed completely under new ownership. Workers arrived early each morning, repairing walls and replacing broken lights throughout the building. The smell of fresh paint slowly replaced the old scent of oil and dust. New windows replaced the old cracked glass along every hallway. Fresh carpet covered the cold concrete floors in the common areas. A small kitchen was built where the old vending machine used to sit. Contractors installed a modern fire sprinkler system, finally replacing the 30-year-old pipes. Shaq personally reviewed every safety report before signing off on it. He wanted no family to ever face the danger those old pipes once posed. Bright murals appeared on the walls near the children's play area. Local artists volunteered their time once word spread about the project. Slowly, the building stopped feeling like a place people hid from the world. Whitmore worked quickly to expose Thompson's full pattern of fraud and abuse. Records showed he had overcharged at least 12 different families over 2 years. Some families had lost their homes entirely because of his illegal fees. Silas, the security guard, cooperated fully once Thompson's crimes became clear. He admitted he had always felt uneasy about the manager's harsh methods. In exchange for his honesty, Shaq offered him a new role. He would train new staff on respectful, fair treatment of every tenant. Silas took the offer seriously, studying every new policy carefully. He often said he wanted to make up for years of looking away. Slowly, tenants began greeting him with smiles instead of suspicion. Walter, the elderly man from Unit 118, received a small apartment nearby. He thanked Shaq quietly, shaking his hand with both of his own. The young couple, with the newborn baby, moved into a bigger unit down the hall. Every family from those 12 folders received a formal apology and a refund. Whitmore made sure every unfair fee was returned with interest. Slowly, trust began rebuilding itself, one family at a time. Clara moved into a small apartment near the news center within 2 weeks. It had real windows, a working stove, and enough space for both kids. Toby got his own room for the very first time in his life. Mia picked out a soft yellow blanket for her new bed. She held it every night, no longer needing her old stuffed rabbit as much. Slowly, both children began sleeping through entire nights again. Toby started at a new school just 3 blocks from their apartment. He made a friend named Marcus during his very first week there. They ate lunch together every day, trading snacks and stories. Mia joined a small preschool program inside the news center itself. She loved painting more than anything else, covering pages with bright yellow suns. Clara kept every single painting, taped carefully along their kitchen wall. At night, Clara no longer set 3 alarms to wake for different jobs. She slept through, until morning, something she had not done in years. Slowly, the dark circles under her eyes began to fade. Shaq visited occasionally, always quietly, never announcing his arrival ahead of time. He would sit with families in the new dining hall, listening more than talking. Children often gathered around him, fascinated by his enormous shoes. He brought board games sometimes, folding his large frame onto tiny plastic chairs. He always lost on purpose, laughing loudly when the kids celebrated their wins. Parents watched, quietly grateful for these small moments of normal joy. Staff members learned quickly not to make a fuss over his visits. He preferred blending in, helping carry boxes, or fixing a squeaky door. Dignity, he always said, worked both ways in a place like this. One afternoon, he brought Clara a check for $25,000. It was meant to cover old debts before her first paycheck arrived. "This isn't charity," he told her firmly. "This is what you're owed for years of unfair treatment." Clara tried to argue, insisting it felt like too much to accept. Shaq simply shook his head, unwilling to hear any objection. "Dignity isn't a debt you have to repay," he said quietly. The big foundation center officially opened 1 month later, on a bright Saturday morning. Families who once hid in shame now walked through the front doors proudly. Clean beds lined the hallways, where storage units once stood. A donated playground sat outside, filled with laughing children every afternoon. Toby quickly made friends, with 2 boys living down the new hallway. Mia followed closely behind, no longer hiding shyly behind her brother. Local news vans arrived that morning, hoping to cover the mysterious opening. Clara politely declined every interview request, protecting the family's privacy. She believed people deserved a fresh start, not a spotlight on their past struggles. A small sign near the entrance reads simply, "You belong here." No logos, no big names, just those 4 quiet words. Families walking in for the first time often paused to read it twice. Clara worked long hours, but these felt completely different from her old jobs. She helped new families settle in, understanding exactly what they were feeling. She never made anyone feel small or ashamed for needing help. She kept a small notebook on her desk, writing down each family's name. Next to each name, she wrote one small thing they needed most. Some needed shoes for school, others needed a quiet place to cry. She remembered exactly how it felt to be invisible, to be judged. Now she made sure nobody walking through those doors ever felt that way. Every morning, she greeted new arrivals with the same warm words. "You're safe now," she would say. "Let's figure out the rest together." Word slowly spread through the neighborhood about the mysterious news center. Nobody outside knew the true identity of its quiet owner. Most assumed it belonged to some distant, unnamed charity organization instead. Shaq preferred it that way, staying far from cameras and headlines. He believed real change did not need applause or public credit. Quiet actions, he often said, mattered far more than loud announcements. One rainy evening, months after everything had changed, Shaq visited one last time. He found Toby and Mia playing near the new front desk area. Both children ran up to greet him with excited hugs. He knelt down slowly, folding his enormous frame to their height. "You two are getting so big," he said, smiling warmly at them both. Toby proudly showed him a drawing he had made in school. It showed a tall stick figure standing beside a small house. Underneath, in careful crayon letters, Toby had written one simple word: home. Shaq studied the drawing for a long, quiet moment. Mia tugged on Shaq's sleeve, asking if he would visit again soon. "I'll try," he said honestly, ruffling her hair gently. She seemed satisfied with that answer, running off to find her mother. Clara walked over, thanking him again for everything he had done. "You didn't just give us a home," she said softly. "You gave us our dignity back." Shaq shook his head, correcting her gently. "You never lost your dignity," he said. "You just needed someone to notice it." Clara nodded, blinking back tears she no longer felt ashamed of showing. Before leaving, Shaq handed Toby a small paper bag containing a simple sandwich. Inside the bag was also a folded note, written in careful handwriting. He asked Clara to read it to the children later that night. The note read simply, "My father once told me something important. A real giant isn't measured by height. He's measured by how many people he helps stand tall." Clara read it twice, her voice breaking slightly. Outside, rain continued falling softly against the newly painted walls. Shaq walked slowly toward his car, ducking beneath the entrance one final time. He did not look back, though he smiled quietly to himself. The storage yard, that once echoed with shouting, now stood completely silent. No more slamming doors, no more frightened whispers in dark hallways. Only soft light glowed steadily from freshly installed windows throughout the building. Somewhere inside, Clara tucked her children into their warm beds for the night. She whispered the note's words once more before turning off the lights. For the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. The world outside kept moving fast, full of noise and hurried lives. But inside these walls, something quieter and stronger had taken root. Dignity, once stolen, had finally found its way back home. Every family who walked through those doors carried their own quiet story. Some stayed for weeks, others for months, until they found solid ground again. Each one left a little stronger than when they had arrived. Toby kept his crayon drawing pinned above his bed for years afterward. Mia grew braver every single day, no longer flinching at loud voices. Clara often said the hardest chapter of her life became the one that saved her. People often say the world has no shortage of giants walking among us. But maybe the real question is simpler than that. How many of them are willing to bend down low enough to truly see somebody else's pain?